I'm sure there's a reason why she never called us, and she calls the domestic abuse hotline. We're trying to get those calls now as we speak. 4 kids were inside the house. He was arrested for domestic battery in '08 in Putnam County. He was also trespassed from their daycare center on 3/21 of 18, where he showed up intoxicated and created a hard way to go for the daycare folks there when he was out looking for his kids. FDLE has the investigation as per policy. The deputy has been placed on administrative leave, and that's where we are. Obviously this is very difficult for all of us, even for the deputy. You have children that were on scene there. She does tell us that when he's on cocaine, he tends to beat her and become extremely violent. All that stuff will be brought out in the autopsy report. You see him, and I think when you watch the video over as many times as I've watched this go over and over and over again, you can see that he obviously doesn't want her to talk to the deputy, and then obviously he goes hands-on with her in front of the deputy, and that's why the deputy tases him.
Sheriff, you had tweeted out earlier today kind of your thoughts about the deputy's actions and how there really wasn't going to be a good outcome one way or another. Kind of discuss that and reiterate your tweet.
Yeah, there was really no good out. There was no outcome here. The good outcome would have been he allows her to leave the house, because that's what the domestic council wants. They want her out of the house, and I'm sure as per that conversation, that's what she wanted. He wouldn't let her out, and you could see where from her statements to us are also that he speaks English. She doesn't understand English. So he would say things to her in English. She would have no idea what he was saying. The second thing is, how many times did he say, "Stop resisting and put your hands behind your back"? Stop resisting and put your hands behind your back. And his response is, "I'm not leaving this porch, and you're going to have to kill me." And he realizes, I think, the first time he grabs the taser, the deputy pulls out his firearm and tells him, "I don't want to do this, but if you don't let go of my effing taser, I'm going to have to shoot you." And then he takes it, and the taser gets deployed a second time. The way these tasers work is it's a new taser, it's a new model. I can fire probes twice. We know that he fires the probes and he hits him in the small of his back, and he cycles it 5 times. When you see that light come on, if you listen to it closely, you hear a gluck, gluck, gluck sound. That's the taser being deployed again. And the crime scene indicates that the taser was deployed. A second set of probes comes out of that taser.
Sure. Can you further elaborate on how your deputy took as many steps as possible to avoid this?
I think when you watch it and you say to yourself, he's in Seville. He is, and if you look in there, you'll notice there's an awful long time lapse before anybody shows up. He even gets on the radio and says that he has deployed his taser. The nearest unit coming to him was coming from downtown DeLand. And you take it out, and I've done it. I've gone out to crime scenes, lights and sirens. It's going to take you 20 minutes to get up there. He's by himself. If he loses his firearm, he's dead, or everybody else is dead. And we train that if you lose your taser, you have to transition to your firearm. Because if they tase you or drive stun you, and if anybody in this room has ever been tased, you're not controlling your firearm. Because while you're being tased, your firearm can be taken from you.
Sheriff, can you talk a little bit just about why this deputy was there responding to a domestic violence call alone, and you can keep looking at it.
We have only one deputy assigned in that area. Oh, look at you when I answer the question. We only have one deputy assigned to that area, and Seville is out in the middle of nowhere. Small town. Pearson contracts with us for deputies 12 hours a day. The other 12 hours, there's no coverage. There happened to be a deputy up there being covered. And like I said, when they dispatched his backup was coming from downtown DeLand.
Is this an example of how dangerous these domestic violence calls can be?
It's not only how dangerous they can be, but in my heart of hearts, I think as this thing unfolds, you're going to see a woman who was basically held captive by this guy. And I think if you watched it over and over and over again, you could see where he didn't want her to hand the cell phone to the deputy. He didn't want her to come down and come out. And like I said, we don't know the conversations yet that have occurred between the domestic violence people and the victim in this case. We don't know that yet. We're waiting to get recorded copies and then have them translated as well.
How common is it for deputies to respond to a call like this? Not necessarily a deadly one ending in deadly force, but just for domestic violence.
We respond to, I'll give you an example. I think 2 weeks ago in Daytona, we had over 50, just in Daytona, in a 2-week times period, we had over 50 domestic violence calls. And obviously, I think, I'm sure that there's narcotics that are playing in play here. I think when you watch this and play it over and over again, I think the deputy gave, a half a dozen warnings and explained what was going to happen. Really, when you look, hindsight being 2020, if he would let her leave the house, situation's over. If he lets the deputy cuff him, situation is over. But it's not. It's not. It's he tells him he's going to die on those steps. He tells him he wants to be killed in front of his kids. And he already had that struggle. There was already a struggle with the deputy's taser the first time, where the deputy pulled his firearm out and told him what was going to happen. And if you listen to it, he says, you better call your amigos because I'm not leaving this house. And then we have the incident.
Sheriff, talk about, and I know you tweeted out earlier, this intervention you firmly believe after watching this video may have spared this woman's life.
She would have been a homicide victim. I believe in my heart, and having done this long enough, when we leave, her ass was going to get kicked. Because he knows, he called the cops came here, if he can talk his way out of this, she's going to get beat. And I don't speak Spanish, but we've had a Spanish speaker listen to that. And she is yelling in Spanish about, she constantly gets beat, and she's yelling at his friend to tell the deputy that he's kicked my ass before.
Like you said a few moments ago, there's no real good outcome from this video watching. But talk to me about, for those who won't sit and watch everything that we just watched, what you want the public watching tonight.
I want the public to know that this is a tragic incident all the way around. You have children who grew up in a home clearly with domestic violence, and then they watch the father figure get killed by the police. Tell me what good comes out of that? Nothing. He'll never. He's 29 years old. He's never going to change his ways again. He's never going to be able to be a provider for his family. On the flip side of that, I have a deputy, and when you watch it, you don't see somebody who I believe is out of control. You see somebody who's compassionate. You see somebody he doesn't take the BS for an answer. They seize on the fact that he says Beatrice. Well, he says Beatrice because Beatrice is the woman on the phone, and that was what was in the call. He doesn't really know who the victim's name is. He just knows I'm looking for a Beatrice, and right away they're defensive. There's no Beatrice here. You have the wrong address. And then we get to the point where, again, it comes down to, why are you not complying? You have somebody there, lawfully there. You knew what happened. You know that you had tuned her up and you had threatened her with a knife. That's why we're there. The person that doesn't have all the information going in is the deputy. And and then he goes to beat her right in front of him. I mean, he had no other choice but to deploy the taser to stop her from. And the call says he's got a knife. They say she's been threatened with a knife. So who knows where that knife is or where it could have been.
And Sheriff, can you just talk a little bit? You mentioned the deputy being compassionate. Has he had any other instances like this in his past where he had to deploy his weapon?
I can't answer whether or not he's ever deployed his taser before. He's been here 3 years, and by all accounts, he's an outstanding deputy. And I think if you watch this enough, you can see he was thorough. He could have, I've had cases where people blow off a domestic call. He was thorough. They were blocking him in every way, not giving me any answers, and he stayed there. He didn't allow them to block or intimidate him where he would get in his car and say, hey, this is unfounded, this is a wrong call. He saw this all the way through. And, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. You come to work, and next thing you know, you're shooting and killing somebody in front of their children. And that's not what we do for a living. However, when you look at the totality of the circumstances and you look at the fact that this guy gets his taser for a second time, if he deploys that taser on the deputy could probably end up dead, and he would have ended up dead.
What's the lesson to take away from all this?
We say this over and over and over again. It's comply with the police. Because if you look at where the largest number of officers are killed or injured, it's answering a domestic dispute call. And this even goes deeper. I can't tell you the immigration status of anybody here, but here's a woman. I don't know what her immigration status is, but clearly she didn't feel comfortable enough to call 911. She called the domestic abuse hotline. And I don't know the answer as to why yet. I think I know, but I don't know the answer. Why is she not calling 911? She's calling the domestic abuse hotline because she's afraid that if the police show up, something other than, her getting help is possible. And that's another psyche that goes on. I don't know what his immigration status is either yet. Does he decide I'm not, I don't know all that stuff. But I do know in watching that video, I see a woman who's scared for her life at the hands of an abuser who I believe even toward the end wanted to show that he was in total control of what was going on, even controlling the deputy and trying to take the deputy's weapon away from him.
Sheriff, it sounded like 5 rounds fired, and was it in front of
The kids were inside the house, from the best that I know, or have been told. 5 rounds were fired, 4 struck him.
Do we know his name yet?
We do. It is Emmanuel. I'm going to screw up his name, but you're going to get a copy of the initial report too when we give you the video with the faces blurred out.
Do you have it spelling wise? You might be able to.
I can't read my handwriting, so they told me and whatever.
And then you had mentioned this a little bit earlier. He was previously arrested for trespassing.
He was arrested for domestic violence in 2008. We're trying to get that report from Putnam County. He was arrested for DUI in 2004. He was trespassed from the daycare center, which is right up the street on 321 of 18, where there was some type of another domestic incident. And again, we don't know the details of it, other than he went to the daycare center and tried to get the kids out. She had beat him to the punch and got the kids out. And he was so intoxicated that the owner of the daycare center wanted him trespassed. So.
When he has somebody on the other end of that DV hotline say she has to leave the place, does he even have an option, the deputy?
No. He's got to do something. He can't just turn around and walk away, because obviously the DV hotline has the whole story. That we're only getting snippets from the call taker. Threatened her with a knife previously. She's been on the phone with him before, and you got to get her out of the house. So obviously there's a whole dialogue there that we don't have yet. That I'm hoping that it's a videotape line, which I'm sure, audio tape line, which I'm sure it is, and that's why she says you have to get her out of the house. Now, obviously, once he goes up and attacks her, he's under arrest. Mm-hmm. So that would have abated the problem right there. He goes down, he gets handcuffed, and out the door he goes. But that's not what happened. And like I said, you see it all the time. I think we had a domestic dispute recently where the officer lost his gun and was shot and killed with his own firearm in another part of the country. So. These calls end up deadly. Unfortunately, this isn't like it occurred in downtown DeLand where I could have had 5 or 6 deputies there. This occurs in Seville, which we only normally have 1 deputy assigned. Really, nothing really major goes on up there. Why would you assign 20 deputies? And he's going on a call that really, it's a domestic call that we go on over and over and over and over again. And there was no signs that it was an active, he's actively beating her, or he actively had a knife to her throat. It was they're on the line. We need to get there, do a well-being check, and get her out of that environment.
Thank you so much, Sheriff.
I thank you guys. Andrew, you got the copy of the report with the spelling for them, and you guys got